My name is Daniel Tenner. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a startup called Rubius, which is a collaboration tool for architects, engineers, and designers. I blog at a blog called danieltenner.com, and this talk is actually based on an article that I wrote on that blog. Because before Rubius, I started another business called Vocalix, which didn't go so well. I had a big fallout with my partner, who was also my best friend, and I learned some lessons from that because that fallout was really avoidable, and it really didn't need to happen. With some very simple steps early on, I could have avoided all of it. So I want to share those with you tonight. First of all, do any people here run their own startups? Yeah, a few. How many people here would want to run their own startups at some point? Okay, a bit more. So just a quick overview of what a startup is. Basically, a startup is a device to try to turn £1 into £2. But when you start a startup, you don't really know what that device is. You don't really know what your business model is. You know that it's going to need to be able to scale, but you don't know what it is that's going to actually make you money. You might think that you do. You might have a really good idea. You might be really convinced that you have a great idea, but you don't necessarily know it in advance. And what this means is that as a startup, you're going to need to follow opportunities a lot. So you have a lot of opportunities that happen all the time, and things can change really, really fast, and you can't really make any plans, even for really what you're going to make next week. You have a vision of what you're going to make next week, but you have to follow the opportunities that turn up. Because of that, startups can be very unpredictable, and that's really challenging, because you can't rely on anything. You don't really know what's going on. Sometimes you feel very surrounded by all those things that you don't know that are around you. So startups tend to be a lot like what I like to call a sort of bipolar roller coaster. You wake up in the morning feeling really good, really happy, really on top. Your product is going to kick ass, and you're going to take on Google and wipe the floor with them. Okay, maybe not Google. And then a few hours later, you'll have had some other meetings and stuff, met some people, and you'll start to feel really depressed about the fact that there's all these unknowns around you that you just don't know what you're going to do. And how could you be so foolish to be following this idea? And obviously, it's all going to fail. And then another couple of hours later, you're going to be up again and feeling energetic and doing stuff. That said, I don't want to put you off it. I think running a startup is really awesome. It's a lot of fun. I've been doing that for 3 years now, and I don't regret a single minute of it, not even the downtimes, although I wish I'd prepared a little bit better. So with all these challenges, it should be somewhat obvious why you might want a co-founder to come with you. So one thing that a co-founder provides is a certain sense of sanity. So you're doing something completely new. A lot of people are going to tell you that you're crazy. Having a co-founder means that at least there's somebody else who's crazy in exactly the same way, which can be very comforting in the downtimes. Provides you with some stability as well. So usually those ups and downs, you don't have the ups and downs at the same time. So if you're up and your co-founder is down, you can pull them up, and vice versa. So it makes those downtimes a bit easier because you can talk to somebody who really understands what you're talking about. It helps with persistence as well, because if you're running your startup by yourself, before you've launched, before you've got traction, it's easy to be distracted by life, by all sorts of things that are happening around you, and to leave that on the side as a kind of project that you're going to work on once you have the time. With somebody else depending on you, you're more likely to go and actually continue working on it and persist and turn that side project into an actual business. And of course, co-founders provide you with an additional perspective, the extra skills if you start a business with somebody who's got different skills than you, and the extra horsepower of having just a second person working with you in these early stages where you're really, really strapped for time and resources. This is something that's repeated in a lot of articles online, because it's really true. Starting a business with someone is almost like marrying them for 5-10 years. You will be talking to your co-founder probably more often than you talk to your spouse or partner. Even if they're in a different city, you'll be calling them 4 or 5 times a day, having hour-long conversations. Basically, you end up in really close contact with your co-founder. And if it's not somebody that you can get along with, that's going to bring out a lot of frictions, and you're going to end up ripping each other's heads off. And one interesting thing is a lot of people who are looking to start startups this is especially true for business people, but also for technical people. Try to find, so they think, okay, I want to start a startup, I need a co-founder, I'm going to go and find a co-founder. And I find that that process isn't really very good for finding co-founders. One that I like to recommend to people is that rather than going out and trying to meet a co-founder, which is a bit like going out and trying to meet a wife, you get to know some people, you go to networking events like Drink Tank, Open Coffee, Minibar, get to know a bunch of people, and later, maybe 3 months, 6 months later, you might find that one of them actually makes a really good match for a co-founder. Or alternatively, of course, you can start up with an existing friend. If you've got a friend who has the right kind of skills and interests and the right kind of drive to want to start a startup with you. Now, however, like all marriages, things can go really, really badly. So especially if you start a startup with a close friend, I would recommend that you are really, really careful, extra careful to make sure that you do things properly, because otherwise, if things go badly, you might end up losing not only a business, but also a really close friend. And that's, losing a business is one thing, losing some guy who's been your best friend for 10 years is a bit more dramatic. So, what can you do to help with that? Well, there's a number of things you can do, but basically, the time when co-founders break up is when they have disagreements. So, when you haven't planned ahead what you were going to do when certain things happened, and once you reach those disagreements, once the disagreement is open, it can be very difficult to resolve because people's emotions are high, tempers are high, and it's very hard to think and act rationally in those circumstances. So one way to avoid this kind of disagreements is to deal with what I call implicit agreements. This is especially the case if you start up with somebody that you know really well, like a really close friend. Because you know them, you've known them for God knows how many years, you understand them, you think you understand them, you think you know what they're saying when they're saying something, and actually, because you've known them in a social sphere rather than the context of a startup, you can make a lot of false assumptions about what they're actually talking about, and it's very easy to just assume that, yeah, okay, we're talking about the same thing, yeah, we understand each other, let's just move on to like doing something. And those implicit agreements are the ones that end up nailing you if you don't deal with them. So one good power question would be, what do we both mean by X, Y, Z? So what do we both mean by the business is successful? What do we both mean by the business is unsuccessful? What do we both mean by working really hard? So the key there is that you need to ask those questions, and there's a list of example questions like this on my blog, on the article I wrote about this. So if you want a good list of questions to get you started, you can look there. But so you want to not assume and check those kind of things. So make agreements explicit. There's other ways to make the agreements explicit other than just bringing them up. You can help make them more explicit. One thing you can do is detail your agreements. And one good way to do that is to use explicit numbers. So rather than saying, yeah, we're going to work on this as long as it takes, say, well, how long is as long as it takes? Because maybe one person means that, yeah, we're going to work on it for 5 years. Another one is thinking, well, I'm going to give it 6 months, and then I'm going to move on to something else if it's not working. And that's not a reason not to start a startup together, but you need to know that, because otherwise you get to 6 months in, and one guy will be like, okay, well, it's not working, I'm going to go and do something else. While the other one is just getting into it. Another good one is that, so what will you be happy with in terms of success? And what do we both mean by the business is successful? You want to put numbers on this, because one person might be thinking, I want to be making £5 million a year at least, so otherwise I'm not happy. And the other one might be saying, well, you know what, if I can pay my bills and everything and keep working on what I love, I'm happy. And if you've got this mismatch and you don't resolve it, that can really, really screw you later. How else? One really useful thing to do is to write things down. It's easy when you discuss things with somebody to just hand wave the agreement through. You say, okay, yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying, and let's talk about this other subject. And another thing is that people forget what they agreed when they've just discussed it, especially if you discuss it over a pint in the pub. writing things clearly really brings out the disagreements. This happened to me while my first startup was kind of falling apart. Near the beginning, I thought we'd actually reach an agreement where we found a way to keep moving forward. But I wasn't entirely sure that my co-founder actually agreed with what I was saying. So what I did is I took the time to put 4 or 5 pages together to describe what I was going to do with the business, and I sent that to him. And he spent a day thinking about it, and then he got back in touch with me and said, you know what, now that I see it in writing, I don't think I can agree with that, and so we haven't really resolved it. And I'm glad we did uncover that earlier, because otherwise I would have gone and spent months going with that, and then had an even bigger disagreement with him later on. Another thing, don't be afraid of discussing the scary stuff. It's in the enthusiasm of starting a new startup, you can find it almost embarrassing to discuss some things. Like, for instance, one topic that people rarely discuss but that they really should discuss is what happens if one of us quits. Now, that's really not what you want to be discussing when you're making all these plans, talking about all these dreams, getting excited, deciding how you're going to take over the world, make millions, or just run a really good business that you love. But things happen. People's circumstances change. They get married, they have children, they decide to move to another country, they get an awesome opportunity for this dream job that they've dreamed about since they were kids. And it's not, so asking this question doesn't mean that you're not committed to the idea, but just that you're realistic and you realize that things happen, and sometimes people do quit from startups. A lot of the comments on my blog, some of them outline some things which happened with some people on startups, and most of them were with somebody quitting or not pulling their own weight, being distracted by something else, and those co-founders hadn't dealt with that issue, hadn't discussed it ahead of time, and so they ended up having a lot of bad feelings about it and having a lot of infighting because they hadn't discussed this stuff. Finally, one important point is don't make it work at all costs. And here, speaking from experience, I started my first startup while I was still working a full-time job, and I wanted to get out of the corporate world. I really wanted to get out of there. And when the opportunity came to start something with my friend, I felt this might be the only opportunity that I'll ever get. After 3 years working on startups, I now have a better picture of how often opportunities come up, and I find that if you're looking for things, opportunities will come up. So I'm not suggesting that you should wait forever until the perfect opportunity comes up, but if you feel that something is really wrong about a specific partnership, even if you feel under pressure to take that opportunity, wait. It's not worth having the whole thing fall apart around your ears. I was really lucky that we had a really good common friend who mediated between us and helped us keep talking and helped us resolve the issue. And I was really lucky that I had another startup to jump into as well. If I hadn't had either of those things, I would either have lost a really good friend or ended up with a big problem of, what am I going to do? Am I going to get another job when I'm feeling quite depressed and all that kind of stuff? So it's not worth going into it if you feel that it's going to be wrong, because it's not going to suddenly make itself better after a year of working really closely together. So, in short, I hope I haven't put you off starting up, because I really do think that starting up is awesome. I don't regret any of it. Even the downtimes, I learned a lot from those times. I learned a lot about my friends as well from those times. I think starting up with a co-founder is even better, and I in fact recommend it. If it's your first startup, it really helps to start with somebody else, because you'll have all these benefits that I described before, and you don't really know what you're doing, so you really need all the help that you can get. But make your agreements explicit, detail your agreements, write things down. Don't be afraid of discussing negative scenarios, and don't make it work at all costs. Thank you.